Good morning to you once again, Uganda, and happy 62. So proud to be part of the milestone that has been as we charter yet another 365 days around the sun as a country. It begs the question into some of these sectors that we know ought to be the pillars of any nation. One of those pillars is education, and therefore in our Kickstarter we're going to be focusing on the evolution of Uganda's education post-independence. I am Priscilla Regina Deloga. Welcome aboard. Now, of course, the development of education in Uganda since independence has been on measurement and weighing scale, and we get to look at the purpose of it to be able to charter the way that each one of us individuals envision for our country, Uganda, but also on a national perspective through the national development plans and all these programs that are being implemented left, right, and center. Where is the element of education? Now, in the earlier years of independence, Uganda did face the daunting task of extending access to education to a larger population. Civil society organizations, in particular missionary groups, joined hands with the government, and they were able to build schools and provide educational resources to underserved communities. And I think they did a good job in every region, in every sub-region where there was a church planted or a mosque planted. There was equally a school that was planted, and this is primary into secondary and some even university today as we speak of. You also get to see the health sector being impacted by that. Now, when you look at those realities, these partnerships did extend the opportunities, especially for rural areas. However, we are now in the 21st century. It is clear that the focus has shifted beyond access to education. We're now aiming to ensure quality learning outcomes to all Ugandans, and these are students in particular. So as we get to turn the pages onto 62 years of independence, is it fitting to reflect not only on the nation's political history, but also on the invaluable contributions of civil societies in shaping its educational landscape? Now, when you look at education in particular, it has always been the cornerstone of progress, without a doubt. Me, myself here, I'm seated here because I had to go through education. If I hadn't gone through education, I wouldn't be seated here in the morning show. So that is how impactful it is. And the collaborative efforts among the government, other stakeholders and civil societies has equally done a very, very pivotal role in the growth of education in Uganda. So as we get to reflect on the past, present and future of the education, we are definitely grasped by those that have been in the system within the time frame of those 62 years. We do have the Vice Chancellor, Equator University of Science and Technology, Professor Mouhammad Mpezamihigo, joining us for this conversation. Later on, Dr. Lawrence Muganga for Victoria University will be joining this discussion. But as we kickstart off, happy independence.
Happy independence, Priscilla, and happy independence celebrations to all Ugandans, all East Africans, and Uganda being part of the United Nations. We are here to celebrate, honestly. 62 years is not a mean achievement. Okay.
Yes. In those 62 years, what are you proud of in your capacity as an educationist?
Well, first of all, I have to say, as a Ugandan, I'm a full beneficiary of the education system. I went to my primary school when I was 7 years. And I was born just 6 years before our independence. So I can say about 50 years, about half a decade, I've been as a student, I've been as a teaching staff, I've been as a researcher, and in the last almost 25 years, I've been in top university management. So I'm a product of this 62 years of independence, although I'm not yet that old. So I think it's a good day. Yesterday was a good day to celebrate independence, and a lot to learn. When we map out the journey of 62 years in terms of education, we are able to scope and see where have we come from, where have we been, where are we right now, and where are we heading. So I think if we have this discussion, it would be lovely to understand and appreciate the milestones so far achieved. Okay,
as one who sits next to the equator or closer to the equator, yes. Walk us through how the sun of education has actually cycled itself.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, we must not detach ourselves from the historic perspective. Uganda was colonized by the British. We all know. We've been learning and teaching and training our kids, and they become pupils, they become students, they become graduates. So you will find that the education landscape for the last 60 years in this country has several sections of, if you wish, profiles. You have the colonial time, pre-colonial first of all, then the colonial time, then around independence, post-independence, then the 70s up to the 80s, where there were very serious World Bank policies that determined actually with the restructuring programs of various economies. They said the focus would be on primary education rather than higher education. Then the 80s up to the time of the NRM government, where education became now a private service. Government allowed institutions to operate. It's a public service, it's a public good, but allowing private providers. That also brought with it quite a bit of scenarios. And so we are in this, and now what I can say with the advent and the big revolution in digital technologies, we are getting into another phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Being joined by Dr. Lawrence Muganga, Vice Chancellor for Victoria University. Good morning to you, Doctor, and happy independence to you.
Morning, Priscilla. Happy independence to you too. 62 years, that's how old we have become. Yes. Very good reason, yeah. Good morning, viewers, as well.
All right.
Yes.
Of course, we have had the walk around the sun through the equator, but from your
I admire his position, where he is.
Right?
At the equator.
Very strategic position. Okay, Dr. Lawrence, we'd like to hear from you.
We receive the 2 peaks of the rain, of course, despite now the climatic interruptions, but at the equator, especially in Masaka City, it's a city with less traffic jam. Sometimes you have no traffic jam. It's also a city of less pollution, and also noise pollution is also not as much as here. So you are calm.
Professor, I see you're trying to tell us to come to Masaka.
We're still breathing clean air.
Yes.
As we do that, we want to look at the evolution of the education system and sector by and large over the 62 years. What do we appreciate from what we picked up from in regards to our independence, and then how really have we utilized on it to build a better education sector for us as a country?
It's very befitting to, for one to remember where you're coming from. You can, if you look at one is coming from, where, for example, I come from, in this journey called education, you can now tell that there is significant change that has happened. Now, I remember myself, and who entered this journey 1984, okay, 84. But I used to walk 10 kilometers to find a school to go to. 10 kilometers, a P1 child, all right? Today, it doesn't happen. Do you understand? Now, it became worse when I reached primary 5, and primary 6, I studied alone in the class. Why? Because the only school that was available in my area had classes primary 1 to primary 5. And the teacher, the head teacher, offered to teach me alone as a primary 6 student to save me from the long trek, which involved forests and rivers and everything, to find a school that has primary 7, right? So, but when it came to primary 7, I had no choice. Now, together with the schools within that particular village, we had to walk 20 kilometers going, 20 kilometers coming back. Those are 40 kilometers to find a school. So today, you just throw a stone around your area and there's a school. And I found my colleague, Professor Mpezamihigo, talking about the emergence of the government allowing the private schools to come into play, other than the few public schools. So we have moved a distance, and we can give that credit to government. Something has changed. But we still have a lot to do. Yes.
Yeah, what I can add to what Professor Muganga has just said is the fact that the earlier education target was to prepare civil servants,
True.
actually to serve the British protected rule. That's really, and that's why the jobs then were actually called white-collar jobs. So where people getting education at that time was supposed to be like, you can say, the channels through which the colonial masters did their job. And that is how these foundation schools, the historical schools that we know, very old schools, you know, King's College, Budo, Gayaza, and several others, were training. And at a particular time before 1922, when we now had Makerere College, people were actually completing their junior schools and then are able to go and do Cambridge, they go to London, they go to wherever, and then those formed the initial cohort that actually participated in the independence struggle. You know, and this division and the focus on education was also a bit it was a bit sectarian, because when the British government allocated budgets, it did not allocate budgets accordingly. So you would find certain areas within Uganda pre-independence really not as having privileges as the central part, and that is why you find that many or most of the original schools in the British system were actually centered around the kingdom, around a place where there was already organization, and so they found it so easy to create individuals who would carry forward. So immediately after independence, now these people who had the front row in education were ready to take on positions. You know, you remember people like Abu Mayanja, you remember several other people who were in the different parties. So this is something that we need to remember. With time, the increase of population, expansion, we got independence, we didn't have enough manpower, and so then there was this struggle. Those who were there early got the first opportunity. So that's an important era within our independence, pre-independence and around the independence period.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Professor, you talked about how privatization has actually aided in building and expanding the education sector in Uganda. But nevertheless, it hasn't taken away from the responsibilities of our government upon, you know, watching over the education sector. And over the course of time, the government has also been cooking up some elements. For example, the universal primary education, universal secondary education. You do have the affirmative actions that was given to higher institutes of education, with the girls getting the bonus point to be able to access higher education. Give us an assessment of those and how they've been pivotal also in expanding education and also maybe perhaps adding value to Ugandans in terms of quality.
In developed economies, for example, we have noticed for so many decades, even centuries if you wish, education is a public good to them. And access is a right to those, to the kids that belong to those respective countries. And in Uganda, we would have loved to have that, where every child has free access to education from the time the inception of education in this country. So, but in the absence of that, you have seen that government has come up with the elements you have just mentioned: universal primary education, the affirmative element as well. When some people are lagging, seriously lagging behind, people with disabilities, the girl child, and other sections of the population. So those have been very, very important. They have really helped us to elevate ourselves from the worst illiteracy levels to at least register a significant population that is really in the higher bracket of literacy rates. So UPE has really been, you can fault it all you want in terms of quality. Yes, something needs to be done, but it has provided a significant chunk of the population access to education. USE, right, also is another kind of intervention that has really taken care of the children from low-income families or really, really poor families. And they have really given been given a chance. You notice this wherever we are in different universities. You find so many students that have gone through these systems, and without them, they wouldn't have gotten a chance to really even reach where they have reached. So, quality, okay? Yes, 62 years, we have this. And we appreciate, and we can't even think of going back. We can now make it a right that every child is entitled to access to education. And we even go ahead and say that every young person should be enrolled in school until senior 6. Okay, that's when you're going to get a really sane population, a very educated population. If you have you don't allow a student to drop out until they have completed their high school. That is what is happening in other economies that have a better human capital that is well trained to now, given even what the other interventions in terms of learning and teaching that are coming in today, lower secondary, upper secondary, if you bring them in and now you have total universal access to a primary, secondary, and it is compulsory education for everyone, we are going to have a greater population. But that comes back to a point where you're going to say that now education is a public good offered by government, at least from primary to senior 6.
Okay, all right. Professor Mpeza.
Yes, please.
He talks about quality, and quality is really not to the end, beneficiary, the student. Equality, I believe, starts from administration. It starts from how you're managing the dispensation of this education. It goes down to the teaching and non-teaching staff. And right now, there's that whole battle the government and the ministry in particular are having regarding the national teachers policy and how you must improve the quality of the teachers. But it's having a lot of wrath back and forth, and then it will dispense down to the student. You're one who has over 20 years of experience in leadership at university level. Yes. Talk to us about these particular elements shaping and leading us to the desired quality of education.
Yeah, thank you very much. Definitely, it's just like one wants to prepare a cake. And so depending on the ingredients you use, the kind of tools you are using, I'm using this analogy to help our viewers understand that in the period of colonial and post-colonial and around independence time, let's appreciate that the numbers were actually manageable. People got jobs even before they completed. The time I went to school, my colleague here, I was 10 years ahead of him, because when he was just beginning, I was almost finishing my O-level. And so that time, everything, most items were almost free. When we went to university, we benefited from the boom. We were given transport. If you were not given transport, they sent vehicles to come and take you, can you imagine? And we had routes for use. So that was the time. Now, when the population grew and the agenda now shifted from producing people to run a colonial government into our own independent state, then the requirements shifted, although not at the rate, because the colonial masters came with an agenda. So that agenda they fulfilled, whereas we had an agenda of becoming independent, but the preparation was not that adequate. So now, in the current times, there are several things that affect quality. First of all, if you are looking at these support systems of universal primary education, universal secondary education, us actually, I can say, more or less studied for free at university. I remember there were huge strikes when there was cost sharing introduced in Makerere, where I went for my bachelor's and master's degree before I went to the UK for my PhD. The issue of, first of all, management of these institutions. Before you even talk about, good governance, how is the institution run? By the way, this cuts across even from an ECD school, a nursery school. How is it governed? How is the leadership? What are the skills of the people? Number two, very, very critically, financing. Okay, financing to be able to pay staff on time, pay them adequately. Number 3, the equipment and resources in a school or an education institution. This is a priority. There is something that he has talked about which leads us to access, equity, and social justice. I mean, access means that him and I, coming from different backgrounds, are given level ground to access education. Yeah. It's not about creating ramps in institutions and creating I love your left-handedness because I have some children who are left-handed.
I am.
So you go into a lecture theater and there's no single chair for where Priscilla and the people of her likes.
I remember I had a difficult time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I had to sit on a particular side of the bench of the desk to be able to.
Yes, even when I'm helping my daughter to do some reading, when I tilt, I'm right-handed. When I tilt her book, she tilts the other way. So these seem to be very minor, people, children with special needs. So access, equity, and then social justice. You, like the 1.5 points you are talking about, which was introduced in public institutions, brought about a huge leap in access of female students into higher education. Now we are having a problem. There is now an imbalance, and people are now deliberating. I wish just to add one more point that affects what we do. The education system in this country does not operate on an island. We are within the East African region. What happens in Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, now Somalia, and DRC and others affects what happens here. The skills, the language skills, the communication skills. And then last but not least, data. Do we base our decisions for improvement and transformation on research-driven data? How many of our teachers and university staff need retooling? What are the backgrounds of the students who are coming massively, because our education pyramid is such that the bottom is so broad, it is filtering through into the higher education system. The lower curriculum, lower secondary curriculum has been revised. Maybe the A level is in due course. The primary needs to be done. What are we doing at the university level? So quality cannot be defined just as fit for purpose, but you need to embrace all these factors in order for us now to set another agenda in the next maybe 5 years. What type of education we want? They are talking about competence-based. Have you invested enough resources? At the university, my colleague here knows, the curriculum we are submitting to National Council for Higher Education for accreditation needs to be reconsidered.
True.
For example, at Equator, what we are planning to do in our new programs, we want a curriculum that will have sections of the semesters or entire semesters placed in industry, placed in the community. If you are doing mass comm, I should negotiate with NTV, for example, and the media house, so that in one semester I attach my students. But that will require collaboration, to require partnership, and most importantly, financing support.
All right, Dr. Muganga, so as we wrap up looking at some of the programs that the government put through UPE, USE, and so forth, you talked about how they could use some improvement. And I know that you have been able to have some of these discussions with the powers that be on areas of improvement. Talk to us about those areas of improvement and what we should actually do so that the next 62 years are better and producing quality that would have been invested in 62 years back.
Yeah. So there are several things. You need to go back and look at the education system that we have. Earlier, Professor Mpeza talked about it, the purpose, why it was even established in the first place. This, if you look at it, it was meant to produce some obedient workers that are not supposed to think beyond what they have been told. Stick to what you have been told, and once you really perform well with that, you are a very good employee who is going to become a good civil servant. So that was serving the 60s, 80s, 90s, and the colonial times. But I don't want to really pick excuse all the time, like the colonizers, the colonizer. No, we are celebrating 62 years.
You're senior citizen?
Yes, we are senior citizen and we are independent. The question is, what have we done, or what can we do to make sure that we are really, really independent? So now here is what we need to really look at. You need to look at the that time they looked at the problem they had, and they created an education system that answers the problem of the day. The challenge we have is that that same education system is the one we want to address the problem of today, and perhaps even help us address the future challenges that we are supposed to face. That is not going to work. Because look around. Everything that a human being uses in real life has changed. From the car people used to drive in the 80s, to the medication we used to really administer to us in the 90s, to the 2000s, everything has changed. You look at the printing press, okay, where we thought that a human being had innovated something great. And then we came from that. There was even an atomic bomb that almost finished people. And we thought a human being had invented something great. But all those were driven by a human being. Now, we are at a time where we have even technologies that can learn, that can communicate, can think, and all that is not embedded in our education system. So we have to come back and think what education fits we as a population. He has just talked about a curriculum that has been done lower secondary, and I am praying that upper secondary, high school, it is done like yesterday, because we have students who are going to sit exams.
When it's done, when you say yesterday, the year has 3 months to end.
I am
and
praying.
Then you will need those to get a secondary secondary competence.
Yes, because for us, look at
have a new cohort.
Yes, look at this. The senior 4 students are going to sit, okay? And we don't have a curriculum that is going to welcome them.
So it is all in vain.
So I am praying that those who are in charge and are looking at us, this is the time we have to really love our country and do something good for it. Because where are we taking these kids? And then he talked about university. We ourselves, we need again to come back to a round table and think, what kind of curriculum really fits a student of today, right? Like, when you look at all of us, like we are still training students. Most institutions are training students as if the way their teachers went to school, and they think it still works today. It does not work. So we need to change those things. I'm glad they're taking that path. We have taken that path. But of course, we have regulators. We have a ministry. It has to support us. It carries resources. Look at technology, for example. Today we sit like, you know this saying of, it's a metaphor of a frog, that if you put it in a bottle somewhere, glass, and you pour cold water, I mean, something like cold water, and you start heating it, it still thinks, I still have time to jump out, because water is cold. And when it starts boiling, that's when it realizes that it is too late. Now, all of us are seated in that kind of pot, waiting that technology doesn't concern us. It is AI is here. It will not even take our jobs. It is, but we are going to wake up when we are the last people in the queue. Other countries have gone, and no one is paying attention to that, right?
And we'll still have the tag of a third world country.
Exactly. So yet we had a chance to leapfrog, like to really jump out of this third world category, which irritates me to be called a third world country. Yet we have the opportunity to embrace what everyone is fidgeting. Even America is still fidgeting with technology.
And now let's expand the wings of this discussion and move away from analysis of Uganda. Let's analyze it from the, in comparison to those that have moved ahead in terms of times. Because if you were to look at the differences in times of independence, then, I mean, you can easily catch up now and then. I look at the paper this morning, a government handing over Chitezi rubbish to a Ghanaian investor. You know the professors that have been writing these papers and doing the research, and you know that they have provided solutions that are Ugandan based, and you have people here in the country that can sort out solutions. But this is where we are standing, and yet as far as education is concerned, we have people that are in capable positions to handle this. You have been giving your submissions, and it has caused me to ask myself, if we are a country who in our national song with pride of of the fertile soils that we have. And that soil fertility has had us on the world map at some point X in terms of cash crops, coffee, cocoa, and cotton, and things like that, meaning that agriculture is really truly a backbone. The president of the last 10 years, he has been talking about industrialization. Now it's agro-industrialization. Does the education sector that we have speak into these directions that the country is taking, or even should be harnessing right now? We have the oil that is around the corner, but look at how we're exporting labor. We're having to export, companies to be able to come and do the work here, versus working on the education system to feed into these national agendas.
Yes. I mean, I can come on board on this, and I like the analogy you have given. I mean, at independence, we were at the same level with several countries, and I can mention Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and many other countries. Yeah. And what they did was being just pragmatic. And I'll tell you how one country, even Pakistan is one of the countries. What they did is they itemized the issues. They said, number one, we do not have the adequate human resource, the capacity. So for 30 years, for example, Malaysia deliberately decided to invest in their people, send them in developed countries where they were able to get equipped and get, the knowledge, the skills, and then when they returned, the government actually said, okay, we are even not levying any tax on your income. So for another 30 or so years also, they reduced the burden. In South Korea, for example, they realized that in order for you to get good quality graduates, you actually need the best teachers. So they made sure a teacher at every level is the most paid servant. So teachers, that issue, the equation comes back, because if you have a very good teacher, you should expect some good results. And then once the people are out, there's the other political point which you are raising. Many people complain about the quality of graduates. Indeed, maybe some institutions are not doing their job very well. But again, the expansion, the rate at which there is this massification of education institutions is not matching with the growth of our economy. And so what do we do? When you see massive, movements going into the Middle East and other places, these young boys and girls are looking for short-term survival strategies. But imagine this girl who has left maybe at the age of 16 to 18 or 20. They are going to work 2 years, 3 years. Now, what if the job ends? They come back home and they have no place at all. So we are not necessarily castigating the initiatives to find some options to earn a living, but for a sustainable future, we have to do what they call education for sustainable development. This is a key issue. It has to be sustainable in a way that you empower somebody either to get a job and work or be able to create one. And if we don't resolve that and create incentives, for example, in Uganda, recently, and we missed Muganga, we had an annual conference of the Vice Chancellors, and we were looking at the role of artificial intelligence. And one key issue came. We had a commissioner from Uganda Revenue Authority, and we said, okay, we want to be compliant. But what if the government decides to pilot a 5-year period where they come to institutions and say, you are private, you are public university, monthly you'd be paying URA 100 million. We are going to exempt you for the first year. You will have saved 120 million, whatever it is. No, not 120, a billion plus. Now tell us, in year 2,
what you will do.
What investment have you done? Can you offer scholarships to students instead of the burden just being... So we need to have a paradigm shift on how we can invest in education for a sustainable living and a good livelihood. Otherwise, this same population, and the majority are youth, are going to become a huge burden. It doesn't matter when it will occur. Already there's a lot of pressure, and this goes into political ramifications, and again it's a vicious cycle. So I think somebody has to really create a conversational scenario where we bring different minds, we bring communities. Vocationalization is very good, and we thank the government and other NGOs that are supporting skilling and so on. But you skill, you haven't addressed the issue of the market. I mean, if you have thousands of people doing tailoring in a sub-county, okay, where is the market? Okay, they have made their products. Who is going to buy them?
Yeah.
Are they quality standard?
Even the products are expensive because the cloth that they have to use has a 35% tax.
And we no longer grow enough cotton as well. So if we are to import fabric and then manufacture, the cost of production becomes high. We can't compete in the market. So we need to discuss education for sustainable development, where and the president, when the Uganda Bureau of Statistics released the census, can you call them tentative results?
Tentative results, yes, yes.
Yes, he was a bit uncomfortable by saying he's really surprised why
there is continuous improvement.
No, but there is no. He wants a population, but this population will come up with a lot of educational demands. Yeah. And so, how are we planning? You talked about planning authority. Where is the money going, and where are we investing? Okay, exactly. Can we actually enhance the incentives? That is the point I am trying to make, so that colleagues who are in the education sector, the ministry, all the stakeholders, don't think about just the next budget, you know, because even the money is not enough allocated to education. But we should be thinking about next 5 years. So let's look at our competitors in the region. Let's look at our infrastructure and create a scenario, a policy and regulatory framework that is going to support both public and private investment.
Priscilla, just before you come in with maybe something else, just on this very point, you talked about us trying to view ourselves in perspective with the world, those who are doing better, okay? Perhaps we're even the same place we are in today, and we were in the past how many years. I just want to use a few numbers that are going to help us understand. Are we pursuing the right priorities, right? So it's okay to invest in agriculture because we need to eat. It's okay to dig up our oil, gas and everything. It's okay because it is there. Much as we have started very late, but it's okay, we preserved it, we have it. It's fine to have cotton, it's fine to have everything. But look at what is happening in the world. We are talking about trying to give ourselves a chance to escape this third world categorization, even a second world, because we have the opportunity if we got things right. If you know something called GDP, something that contributes heavily to the GDP of a country is the equity market capitalization, all right? But if you look at it at a global scale, just last year, 2023, the global equity market capitalization was about 100 trillions, okay? That is including everything that is in Uganda but around the world. But guess what contributed to that? What contributed to that was the 13 trillions came from disruptive innovation technologies. And that had never happened before. It had only shaped itself within the last 3 years. Okay? Now, the 87 trillions, which is 87%, came from the traditional economy. The agriculture we are talking about, the manufacturing we are talking about, industrialization we are talking about, great. But look at what is going to happen in 2030. It is not that it is likely to happen. It is actually already close to happening. The global equity market capitalization will be 300 trillions, okay? But the contribution of the traditional economy will be 30%. That is around 100 trillions. The 200 trillions, which is 70%, will come from the disruptive innovation technologies. Now, coming back to the question he raised, where do you invest your money as a country? Do you still insist in putting your money in the traditional economy, or you go to the disruptive innovation technologies? Because that's where money is. That's where jobs are. That's how we improve our country. And it doesn't stop us from investing in these traditional things. Cows, milk, beef, cotton, coffee. It's okay. But if you look at the market cap of coffee on the world stage, for example, it is just 500 billions. So when shall we even claim half of that as a country? It is far-fetched. So, but there is a shortcut. And that's how we need, as educators, the education should be molded to really, really pay attention to where the new economy is looking at. Because that's where we are going to find jobs. Not an old economy that is shrinking, that is actually disappearing. That is the traditional economy.
Okay. All right, professors, our time is first spent, yet we were only opening up a can of worms. I'll ask my producer to have a revision of that and be able to bring you back so that we can close this, because at the end of the day, we must look into the future. That is, we do have a few years before we clock 100 years, and never should we be seated here having the same discussion and reflecting on the past, rather
you know,
than priding
the good news, we shall be
taken.
alive.
I know.
The three of us here.
That's very true. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your inputs, and that brings us to the end of our Kickstarter this morning. An agriculture-related conversation is coming your way, and also something in the health sector. Do stay with us.